Let's get chilly. Hello, hello. You are listening to Let's Chill, the official, unofficial Minnesota Wind Chill and Minnesota Strike podcast. I'm Jeff,
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
and we're back. I don't know. Let's just get into it, right? Let's recap. I believe Jay is going to take us on the recap of last weekend's doubleheader against Chicago Union and Detroit Mechanics.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the Detroit game. There
Yeah.
really wasn't a ton there. I would love to say that Minnesota, played well and did Minnesota things, but realistically, it was a game against Detroit. Detroit kind of just didn't play as good as they need to play, sort of like we've seen from them for the last however many years. It was a game against Detroit. We've kind of come to expect these, big wins against Detroit. It was a 10-point win, which was still nice to see Minnesota able to put up 10 points. Um, but to be fair, after the Friday night game against the Chicago Union,
Mhm.
if that Minnesota wind chill took the field against Detroit, Detroit would have had a chance. If Detroit was wearing Chicago jerseys, Minnesota probably would have lost them, is what I'm trying to say. Um, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna spend a little bit of time kind of ripping into the wind chill during my recap. Um, they they didn't look. Chicago almost lost to Pittsburgh on Saturday. Like Chicago won by 2 points against Pittsburgh on Saturday. Yeah, they were a little bit tired playing
That's
against the wind
crazy.
chill, but not really because they won against the wind chill by 10.
Yeah.
Like Chicago is a very, very beatable team, especially for a roster that is as stacked to the wind chill. But the wind chill just like played scared against Chicago, and they continue to play scared against Chicago. Um, every pass that they looked for, they waved off normal looks that they would normally go for, cuts that they would normally take. And I think it was just their lack of confidence in their own ability to beat the Chicago players. Last week, when I was talking about, keys to the game, playing the stats and playing the player, they didn't really do either of those two things. I don't have the exact number pulled up right in front of me, um, but Minnesota's turnover rate was ridiculously high. We talked about how Chicago had a high turnover rate and a low huck percentage. Minnesota didn't capitalize on those two things at all, and they had so many turnovers, especially unforced turnovers
I can give a
against.
quick insight. It was their most turn. So this is actually one of my keys to the game for this week. Total spoiler alert. They had 27 turnovers. Their next highest was 26 against Chicago. And after that, their next highest was 23. So yeah, they had 27 turnovers, which is not by far, but their most in a game this year.
Yeah. Um, Not to mention that, but also their red zone conversion was at 73%. And again, Minnesota, up until this point of the year, had the highest red zone conversion of any
Hmm.
team in the league. And that's, I think, 15 points below what was their previous average. So
Hmm.
they were not playing to the level that we should expect from them. And now I will say some of these numbers are going to be worse because they are playing against Chicago, who is a significantly better team than a lot of the teams Minnesota has played this year. So I'm not like saying that all of this is due to the fact that they played bad, but I do have one clip uh,
Yeah,
that I would like to share
please.
at the request of the
Yeah,
host.
should be good.
All right. Um,
As you bring it up, yeah, I'll just say like it was like you said, not a pretty game. I don't have too much to like add intelligently, but it just like it was really disheartening to see how big of a loss it was. Um I predicted at the start of this season that they were going to lose this game. I knew going in that they were going to lose this game. It's a competitive Central Division. It's an away game. Playoffs are right around the corner, and Chicago is a pretty good team. They're back to being Chicago, but I did not expect it to be as big of a loss as it was. So that was really disheartening to see. And yeah, why don't you share this clip, Jay? What are you going to show us?
yeah, so before I start this, I want to say that I wanted to pick a lot of different points from the game to share, but I feel like this super early on in the game is emblematic of the struggles Minnesota faced throughout the entirety of the game.
Wrote
So
okay.
what we're going to see here is Minnesota's on offense, early in the first quarter. They've already been broken. Um, but this is their ability to sort of like get back into the game, sort of like bring it back within one, pretty early on in the game, and like keep it competitive. So Will Brandt just threw a pass up to Paul Krennic, who is, looking downfield, and I'll slow it down a little bit here. Paul Krennic passes up to Quinn Snyder, and Snyder sort of cuts towards the sideline and barely stays in bounds, but stays in bounds. And right here, you can see Snyder is surveying the field. He has a look back as a dump pass. He's looking to see if, Brant is cutting open, if PK is cutting open, if anyone's getting open. And he's just sort of holding the disc. And all of Minnesota's cutters are sort of just dancing around the field waiting. And now, after watching that, at half speed, you probably can't tell it. Snyder actually holds the disc for 8 seconds there. He kind of gets an extra second from the refs to hold the disc. That is a stall, and they actually end up calling it back and calling the stall count. Um,
And say I felt
and
like he
like,
held it for a long, long time.
yeah, Feldman on the sideline was actually like disappointed in this call. He thought it wasn't a stall count, but it was almost a full 9 seconds that he was holding the disc. And then Chicago goes on to score a break on this. But again, if we want to watch this from where Snyder initially gets the disc on the sideline, um, Minnesota's cutters and Snyder subsequently as a handler don't look like they're capitalizing on the field. So initially, right away, PK has a strike cut up line. Snyder isn't even looking in that direction. PK is looking back towards the disc. I'm not saying it's an easy pass. Snyder's, being force middle. He
He's
doesn't
on the
have an easy,
line.
yeah, he
Yeah.
doesn't have an easier round. Um, but even so, you can fake a throw and maybe draw a contact foul. There's a play to be made there on that pass, on that look, as it's like a viable pass option. But he waves it off, which is fine. But then he's looking for a reset pass here. But the reset handler actually cuts too far back and is too far away from Snyder and doesn't, close that field. So they're not making enough use of the field space that they have. They're not cutting in. And Snyder actually fakes the throw there and waves it off. He waves off that look because there's no throw there. And then at this point, there's no open player on the field. There is a Chicago Union player between him and every Minnesota player, which means that there is at least two cuts that need to happen before Snyder has an open pass. That can't happen this late into a stall situation.
Can
And that
you
happens,
really quick go back to like when Will Brandt throws to PK? I want to go that far back. Okay.
sure.
And then you can keep kind of I mean, I don't know, don't go like frame by frame, but kind of slowly. I want to know leading up to PK throwing to Quinn Snyder where people are. I guess that's kind of where I'm looking at. Because I think a big issue here, again, not to like harp too harshly, but I think a big issue is the cutters at this point. So right here, stop. Pause it. Okay, so look at where the cutters are right now. First of all, they're way too spread out, in my opinion. I mean, I guess it's too early in the game, so maybe that's not fair. I say like, if it's late in the game and then they're spread out, they're not doing very well. But I think that this field looks way too big and everyone's guarded pretty well at this point. We need an in cut right now. Right. I think honestly, maybe potentially even the throw to Snyder might not be the right throw, but like that's forgivable. Like, whatever. But so when we throw to Snyder, let's get the disc in Snyder's hands here. People should be cutting, right? Like that's high IQ for Z. Stop it right there. Look at where all the cutters are. Like no one's ready to continue that pass. And again, like not everyone can be going 100, down the field as soon as the disc is off. Like I'm not like trying to be unrealistic here, but like why is everybody so clumped? It feels like everyone's so clumped right here. And people talk about, you hear the high IQ frisbee of like, well, okay, if the disc is gonna go on the, sideline, like I need to be cutting down already. Like my role on this point isn't to get that reset, for example. My role is to cut deep or whatever the case may be. It just feels like nobody in this case was even prepared for that throw to Snyder. Point being the positioning on the field at this point.
I thoroughly agree. Snyder is actually coming out of the deep space on this. Um, so he was making that undercut to sort of break up
Sure.
that play. I think if Snyder didn't make that cut, PK probably doesn't stall in the middle of the field, but has to take a bad round or something, possibly like a very blockable throw.
Hmm.
Um, I think Snyder actually makes the right call here and actually makes that cut. Um, and
Right. Agreed.
throughout the game, I think Snyder was actually getting a lot of touches of the disc because he was one of the few people getting open. Um, but then again, like Snyder didn't play perfect. He had a dropped catch out in the end zone at one point on a what was for him a very routine catch. But that happens on occasion, but in the game against Chicago, it can't. But so again, Snyder is one of the few people who was consistently getting open in this game. And again, just watching the end of this, just until for about the first second and a half, Snyder has the disc. Five of the six Minnesota players are actually behind him. And then
Yeah,
he's
right.
holding the disc here. Again, it takes an additional two cuts before anyone is actually open because of the way Chicago was playing defense, because of the way Minnesota's cutters weren't really moving around the field. But then
Yeah,
Chicago goes on.
and to be fair, I mean the Chicago's defense was set up perfectly. Like you can harp on Minnesota, and I think deservedly so. And Chicago played that very well. They did a great job at stopping any cuts from happening.
Yes, yes. Sorry, I'm not to like be completely negative of Minnesota, but I think that Chicago was able to get that defensive setup sort of because of this cutter movement or lack of cutter movement, um,
Yeah.
and
Kane, what do you
preemptive
think?
thinking.
I also don't want to harp on the cutters, but I agree that it's kind of like, why is only Snyder making the in cut and then all of the cuts based around that aren't what they should have been? And I know that's kind of what we're all saying, but like it really did feel like no one was taking opportunity or taking advantage of the opportunities and they were waiting for someone else to, and then they would take advantage of the opportunity created by that. And Jay and I
Mhm.
kind of mentioned this last week when we were talking about it, and I'm paraphrasing you here, Jay. So if you want to correct me, it felt like everyone wanted to be the next guy and no one wanted to be the guy on a point. And it really made it feel like it gave Chicago too many opportunities to get in between you and the disc. And like Minnesota wasn't attacking fast enough. Minnesota wasn't hitting those cutters quick enough or utilizing the open space quick enough. And they were kind of waiting for someone else to do it so they could build off of it. It felt like.
I think the one of the worst parts for me on this point, this example, is it is the end of the first quarter. Like it's way too early in the game for these kinds of cuts or lack thereof, for people to be tired, for people not to have that be on the right page. It's way too early in the game for that. And it's like this is where they lost because from the get-go, it seems like, yeah, no one really knew what to do. No one wanted to be the guy, like you just said, Kane. No one could figure it out.
Yeah,
If
that's
it
sort
was
of
if it
why.
was fourth quarter, it'd be a little different, but
And again, that's sort of why I went with this clip. Like it is
mhm,
this early in the game, and this is not the only time Minnesota stalled out in this game.
yeah.
Minnesota stalled out several times in this game because of situations like this where they get on the sideline and just no person was willing to, or maybe not necessarily not willing to, but no person did make that next cut or was thinking ahead to the next play. They always wanted to be the play after. They never wanted to be the current play. And I think, Snyder does a really good job in this game of doing that, of being the person who was willing to. I think when he, made that in cut, he was the only option for PK to take. I think he was thinking, I got to be the next play. But then after that, no one was, oh, I have to be after Snyder. They were all
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I can just kind of jog down the field, get open towards the end zone, and then go. And that just doesn't work out. It's maybe against a team like Pittsburgh, maybe against a team like Detroit, not against a team like Chicago.
Right. Okay. Any additional thoughts on the Union or Detroit? We do have a mini mailbag tonight, not like a crazy one, but we want to save some time for two responses.
I got nothing to add.
Yeah. Well, there'll be a likely rematch, likely against Chicago in Chicago, hopefully um, in a couple weeks. So for the Central Division Championship, but one game at a time. The next game that will be is against Madison at home back at Seafoam Stadium. It's the second to last weekend of the season. It's the second to last home game of the Wind Chill. The Wind Chill have 3 games left. And this will be a preview of the first round of playoffs, whether it's in Madison or in Minnesota, will actually hinges on this weekend. Um, just a quick preview. If Minnesota beats Madison this weekend, they lock home field advantage and they'll host the Radicals for the first round. If Madison wins, then Winchell will be on the road for all of playoffs. They'll travel to Madison for the first round of playoffs. But no matter what, it'll be Madison or the Radicals versus the Winchell for the first round. So this will be a big game, big preview.
I
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Kane.
I was gonna say I could kind of segue into players to watch for this weekend because
Yeah.
we just touched on one of them actually in that last point there in the clip that Jay brought up. And that was Quinn Snyder, actually. I don't know for sure if he's rostered this weekend. I don't see why he wouldn't be. I know he's not playing for the Canada team right now, so he should be available. I think one
I'm
thing that we
I'm
hit on that
checking.
I wasn't even I checked before the repost. They didn't post the roster yet.
He's
Um,
not.
he's not
He's
rostered.
he's not rostered actually.
Oh my gosh. All right. You know what? Matt Rader then. We'll go to Matt Rader. I had a backup
Matt
just in
Matt
case.
Rader's not. You gotta check that they post on the website on
On the
Tuesdays.
website or on the Instagram?
Website
Oh, I only checked the Instagram. Who checks the website, Grandpa? Okay.
okay.
Anyway,
Pick a player.
well, all right. Gordon Larson. We need another cutter. My
Yeah.
point surrounded was the cutter. We need a deep space cutter who's not afraid to take the unders like Snyder was doing. But another thing that I had kind of alluded to last week was Minnesota lost the 50-50s last weekend. They lost every 50-50 against Chicago. Donde Murray was dominating in the deep space. They lost the 50-50s on their unders even half the time. Like 60% of the time they would lose. You know what I mean?
Um,
And I think it it does come down to teamwork and play style, obviously, but at the same time, the individuals have to step up and know that they can make those plays. I was gonna use Snyder because I feel like he's a big confidence boost for the Minnesota team when he's hot.
mhm.
But that could be passed on to someone like Gordon Larson. We'll just slot him in as the next person here. When you get a hot cutter who can score, 3 goals in the first quarter, 5 goals in the first half, just put some numbers up
Yeah.
and then have a quieter second half, even that can just get some momentum, get the game going. And I feel like Minnesota has not had someone to be a spark enough this year.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. I mean, I think Gordon, I guess I don't have his season numbers up right now, but he's a good guy where like he can provide that spark. He's a high energy player and he's very reliable downfield. Like you don't see the disc in his hands throwing very often, but I feel like you always see the disc in his hands receiving. And there's a reason for that.
I totally agree. I think it's hilarious that you picked Rader and Snyder
Yeah.
because that's amazing. Um, but I just agree with the overall fact that Minnesota's cutters this year have been really lackluster. Um, Kane, I know you and I sort of talked about it. Bevon this year, if we were to pick a team MVP, I think for the first year, Bevon really isn't in the running.
Yeah.
Not that he's, having a bad season by any means. He's still playing amazingly. Um, but he's just not putting up his, team-wide MVP numbers anymore. Um, Mind you, he still has a plus minus of 20 right now. So like he's still playing really good. But I think at
They'll
this
be
point,
Vaughn.
yeah, say at this point in the season last year, like a 32. He
Yeah,
finished the season last year with a 43, the year before that with a 42, the year before that with a 46. So
that's crazy.
a plus minus of 20 is good. For any player that's good, but for Bevon, that is a quiet season. Um, and I don't want to say that he's not like hungry, that he doesn't want to, win another championship, but also he won his championship. And as one of the more veteran players on the team, I think maybe even the most veteran player on the field in most instances because Mattis is out. Um, he doesn't need to be the star player anymore. He just needs to be someone to like be a veteran presence. He needs younger guys to be stepping up now. Um, and we just haven't really had that happening this year. So I think, yeah, basically any cutter could be that guy, needs to be that guy for those reasons.
Player to watch, any O-line cutter, please. And if you're listening, let's get you on the pod. Anyway, so yeah, and I guess on the flip side of needing a dominant and spark plug of a cutter, I think we need to also have a quiet, reliable, consistent handler presence. Maybe not someone like the Will Brandt. My actual second player to watch is Tristan Van de Mortel. He's quietly number 2 on the team in assists, I believe, or it was completions. I don't know. I was looking at the stats right before this. Um, Tristan Van de Mortel has been very, very consistent for the past few years here now. I know we've talked about him like stepping up and taking more of a consistent role and a distributor role and getting the disc a lot more. And I think this season we kind of stepped away from him a little bit and tried to put the disc in some more hands. But I really do think that relying on TDVM will be a good way to get the completion rate up for Minnesota, if nothing else, and just can keep it consistent and not turn over as much.
Jay, share your thoughts because that transitions to my keys to the game really well. So,
Yeah, I think Tristan Mortel taking over a captain position this season. Um, like Kane said, he's actually doing really good. He's not leading the team in any stat, I believe. Um, but he's second highest in plus minus. He's the second highest in assists. Um, he's the second highest in completions. So he is having a really good year this year. And I think, Kane, you're absolutely right. We have been really hype on Tristan Martell in the past. We sort of haven't been talking about him all that much this year. And I feel like a big part of that is sort of in the games Minnesota has played where he's been important, other players have been enabled by him. So we've seen him enabling other players. We've seen other players playing well through Tristan Van Mortel. And I think
mhm.
it's a pretty big call out. When Tristan Van Mortel is playing hot, the whole team's playing good.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, Kane, you mentioned just like keeping possessions and limiting turnovers, and that's literally my first key to the game is possess with authority. Last week was the team's worst or second worst offensive efficiency. They had the most turnovers in a game, and then they had the fewest total breaks and the second fewest break opportunities. So to digest that really easily, they didn't have the disc very much. They didn't have a lot of opportunities on defense to get the disc. When they had it on offense, they threw it away very often. And so the key to the game is to keep the disc. If you have the disc, like, don't turn it over. And that feels very obvious, but like you have to know that this possession, whether you're on offense or defense, is going to make a difference in the game. And you cannot throw it away. Especially that's kind of a retroactive key to the game for the Union. Like I think we kind of talked about that. There aren't very many break opportunities. Every possession matters, but you have to get back into that mindset again against the Radicals. And so you have to possess with authority.
I like that. I don't think Minnesota has like been number one in offense in any stat or like completion rate for the past few years here. And even last year, that's one of the reasons why everyone kind of like doubted Minnesota going to championship weekend was just because the turnover
Mm.
rate and their like you said, like the consistency to keep the disc just didn't feel like
Yeah.
yeah. And so I like that call out. I think going back to like my players to watch, part of that does come down to needing a consistent handler and a spark plug or cutter. So I like that.
Yeah.
You need people who be consistent and execute on their throws and catches. Wow.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that.
My second key to the game then is no gimmies. And we're gonna start, yeah, like no point or no possession, no point, no quarter, and no game is a gimme, right? It's never you can never guarantee a win, even against Pittsburgh, even against Detroit, no matter what. No game is an auto win, and even again, like I just said, no possession is an auto goal. Every cut needs to be deliberate. Every throw needs to have a purpose and have a target. And the team just needs to clean up their offense. They need to make smart passes. They need to make good swings, not take unnecessary throws, and like clean up their cuts. Again, like maybe that sounds really obvious. Maybe we are just boiling it down to like cut good, throw good, catch good. But like I think it's more than that. I think they can't let up. Um, every single time you have the frisbee, every time you make a cut and you run a different direction, has to be for a reason.
I really like the call out and clean the cuts up. I'll just say real quick. I mentioned earlier they felt like Minnesota was getting burnt on their unders a lot in the Chicago game. And part of that felt like they were like half committing to it, hoping that another opportunity would show up. And I
Right.
like your call out where it's like it's not a gimme. You can't expect that you're gonna get another opportunity. You have to just take this one right now and fight for it. You have to like if you see that you're taking that under, you can't kind of half cut and hope that something else will open up.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm
Take
taking the
it.
under. I'm taking the under. Commit.
That's my disc. One reason that I even said that in the first place was I mentioned no swings also are a gimme. There are multiple times where they had full field swings in the end zone. I'm like, that should be a Callahan. Honestly, Minnesota's lucky Chicago didn't look up and
Right.
catch the frisbee. It was like you guys are almost literally throwing it away in the end zone. Like you shouldn't be swinging like a 30-yard swing. I'm sorry, professional pickup. That throw should never be taken. That's my opinion. That it should never be taken.
I also think a big part of this, like no gimmies, um, is takes me back to that first game Minnesota played against Indy this year when they sort of blew out Indy at Indy. Um, the announcers kept saying, it's just throws and catches. Indianapolis just has to make some throws and catches. And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of the spot Minnesota felt like. They weren't making throws and catches. They were always like looking for the disc almost.
Yeah.
Um, they weren't going to the disc. They were waiting for the disc to come to them. Um, and that's just
Yeah.
not good ultimate. That's not like fundamental ultimate frisbee. And I think that's sort of what the announcers in the indie game were saying. They got to play fundamental ultimate frisbee, and Minnesota just forgot the fundamentals and hasn't really been playing with them all that much this year, um, because they have been beating teams like Pittsburgh, like Indy, like Detroit, and even to some extent like Madison in their first game this year. Um, so I think part of that no gimmies is also like that fundamental point of ultimate is you're playing against a defender. That defender also wants to get to the disc. You have to beat them there.
Mhm. Yeah, good point. Okay. Any last thoughts on the Radicals game at Seafoam Stadium before we move on?
Just
It's gonna be a
excited to
good game.
another win. Clean it up a
Yeah.
little bit, see what we can do in response to Chicago. Like I said in the text before this, I think Minnesota has a chance to get angry and use this game against Chicago to come back, but it could be very telling if they don't.
I do want to just say one thing. If Minnesota loses against Madison, that does not guarantee a home playoff game for Madison. Madison would need to beat Chicago, or Minnesota would need to lose another game
Okay.
because Minnesota would then still, unless Madison beats Minnesota by a certain amount, would still have the
Right. The
head-to-head.
tiebreaker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks, Jay. Okay. We have a mini mailbag, like I mentioned. I just threw something on our Instagram yesterday. So thank you for the two people who did shout out, like, or to the two people who commented on it. Um, the first question here is, do you think our championship win last year was a fluke? My gut reaction is I don't think you can win a championship accidentally. I don't think it's a fluke to make it to championship weekend. I don't think it's a fluke to win a game in semifinals. I don't think it's a fluke to win a championship game against the theoretically the second best team in the league. Um, I don't think they played the cleanest game. I don't know if they were the best team in the league, but I don't think they didn't accidentally get a ring.
Yeah, if you were to phrase that question like, was Minnesota really the best team last year? I'd say no, but they
Right.
were the championship team for sure because they put together championship games and they were
And not
consistent
and
when they
not
needed to
just during
be.
championship weekend,
Right.
but
They were
all
they
season. Yeah.
executed on the plays they needed to. They were consistent enough to get to that point. So yeah.
I'm going to look at it a little bit from a little bit different angle. I don't think Minnesota winning was a fluke, but I do think that like everything that aligned for that to happen sort of was. In a more optimal, less windy conditions, do I think Minnesota still beats DC and the Flyers? Maybe. It's possible, but I think
Mhm.
it's much more likely Minnesota doesn't win if it's not super windy conditions. I think Minnesota played better in those situations. I mean, clearly. Um, and that's, the Flyers were a great team last year. DC was a great team last year. Minnesota didn't beat two bad teams. They beat two great teams. Um, it would be a fluke if they were, playing Detroit in the championship game or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but
Well,
no,
because they're two Central Division teams, that's why.
yeah, but you know what I mean. They weren't
Yeah.
playing bad teams in those games. They were playing good teams in those games. Teams that easily could have also played in the wind as well as Minnesota did.
Yep.
They didn't. Again, I think in different conditions, maybe Minnesota doesn't win, but I do not think it was a fluke.
True. And it's not fair to even play a what if game because they won, right? That was the conditions, and that is what makes a championship team is you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to play well and play against the best teams. Um,
And
I
mind you,
think it I think it's just not fair to even do that to the wind chill because
Or any other team.
right, that was the conditions. We don't say that if it was perfectly still conditions, we don't say, well, if it was windy, we would have won, right?
Right.
Like it's just not fair.
Yeah. Also, the Flyers did almost make a comeback. Like
They
let's
did.
let's
They
let's be
did.
real here. They almost won that game. Like that was a
Yep.
good game by the Flyers still.
Yep. So thank you for that question. The second one is it's not a question, but it is more optimistic. So I just want to end on this one. It just says we are still in this. Um, I think we can be. I mean, I after the game against Chicago, I'm not feeling super optimistic. Um, I think they have a lot to learn, and yeah, maybe they are still in it. Maybe we just need that kind of injection of positivity and optimism. They got to clean it up.
All I'm gonna say about that is if Minnesota can erase their memories against the two losses against Chicago this year and play against Chicago as well as they played against Atlanta, they have a chance to win it all. Like the team that took the field against Atlanta is not the same
Yeah,
team that took the field against Chicago. I'm
that's a
I'm
good point.
sorry. Like those the level of like field awareness was completely different. The level of like for lack of a better word, level of like energy was completely different.
I think one thing about the Chicago games, they almost feel unfun for watching, from my end, in a way, because I almost know that Minnesota's not going to play Minnesota Frisbee. We're going to play some weird game against Chicago. Always. It's always what it turns out to be.
Hmm.
And I like the idea, Jay, of just like kind of getting rid of that idea, throwing those games away. Chicago doesn't matter right now. Like, we need to go out there, have fun playing Minnesota Frisbee. I think the fans need to get into it. The players need to recommit themselves to the system. One thing Max Longchamp said at the beginning of the year was that this is a more championship level team because of all the buy-in, how much more
Hmm.
buy-in there is this year, how much more commitment and belief there is that this team can proceed and execute when it has to. Um, and I totally believe that the team can, even with those two games against Chicago. I 100% agree. We're still in this. We can win another championship this year against a team like Carolina or Atlanta or New York or Boston. Guess
Yeah.
we just can't win against Chicago.
Yeah, right.
Oh
It's our
well.
only two losses. I mean, yeah, like that Atlanta game felt more like a championship game. And even if they would have lost that game, and even if they would go up to Atlanta in, championship weekend, like I'd be okay with losing. Like it was a cleaner game. You know what I mean? Like I think that could be a legit game. So yeah, yeah. I don't know what it is about the Union, but
Yeah, I mean I made the joke earlier, but put Detroit in the Union's jerseys, and I think Detroit beats Minnesota. I'm
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
joking, but like I'm sort of serious. If you put, if you put Chicago in completely different jerseys, move the team to Atlanta and have that be the Atlanta game, I
right,
think Minnesota wins.
right. No, I feel like you're right for some reason. Okay. Well, we're looking ahead to the Radicals. Madison Radicals. We're hosting them on Saturday. It's superhero night. There's a chili bobblehead giveaway. Um, it's just I think there's gonna be a good energy still. Despite what we just talked about for the last half an hour, this is gonna be a really fun game. And while I can't be there, uh, someone needs to bring me a chili bobblehead. Kane's gonna be there. It's gonna be a fun one, and it's gonna be very important for the playoffs. So show up to Seafoam Stadium, cheer loud. Let's get the Winchell into the playoffs on a good note, and yeah, let's beat those dang Radicals.
Yeah, you always know Radicals fans are going to be there. So if you're not
Yeah,
coming to the game and we
they
lose
will
it's
be.
because of you, it's
Yeah.
your fault specifically. Anyway,
Well,
I'll
that's
see you
that's
there.
me. Yeah, yeah,
Oh yes, Jeff. We're talking to Jeff right now. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
If Minnesota
also
wins,
you
it's
listeners.
Saturday. Yeah, yeah. No, this
All
will be a
right.
fun game. See you there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see you on Saturday night. In the meantime, stay chilly and ka-chow.
Stay tuned.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Stay chilly.